It began with a whisper from the deep. A forgotten probe, a relic of humanity's youth, sent one last message. The probe was a ghost. It had drifted for centuries beyond the known frontier. Its systems were failing. Its power was almost gone. But it had enough for one final cry. The message was not complex. It was a simple string of data and a single, grainy image. It spoke of a star system astronomers called Kepler 186f, a place once thought to be a candidate for life. The image showed the star. But something was wrong. A shadow was falling over it, a darkness that did not belong. The message rippled through the Sol system. It was mostly ignored. An old probe's last gasp was hardly news. Data decay could explain the shadow. A sensor malfunction was the most likely answer. The experts dismissed it. They filed the report under anomalies and moved on. The last whisper from Kepler 186f was lost in the noise. A final, unheard warning. Then, weeks later, the sky broke. An object appeared at the edge of our system. It did not warp into existence with a flash of light. It did not announce itself with grand energy signatures. It was simply there. One moment, there was empty space. The next, there was a structure of impossible scale. It blotted out the distant stars, a void where light should be. It was utterly silent. No radio chatter, no engine emissions, nothing. It hung at the system's edge like a monument to emptiness. Its surface drank the light of our distant sun. It gave nothing back. The structure was a perfect geometric shape, a brutalist spike of a thing. It was so large it defied our understanding of physics. No known material could withstand such stresses. First Command tried to hail it. They sent every greeting in the human and machine lexicon. They broadcast messages of peace. They sent mathematical constants. They even sent our music, a strange offering of hope. The void gave no reply. The silence was more terrifying than any threat. It was the silence of a predator, utterly confident, utterly patient. The silence held for 3 days. It was 3 days of mounting panic, 3 days of watching the unmoving, unblinking void. It felt like a judgment. The Council of Echoes was convened. Leaders from every colony and station gathered. They met in the Great Hall of Unity on Luna. The hall was a place of legends. It was where the first accord was signed. Its walls had seen 1,000 years of history. Now, they would see something more. The beginning of the end, or the start of a new war. Ancient protocols were invoked. These were rules written for threats our ancestors could only imagine. Threats from beyond the veil of stars. A threat they could not comprehend. The council chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Generals in crisp uniforms stood beside philosophers in flowing robes. Data brokers whispered to diplomats. Everyone had a theory. No one had an answer. High Elder Cassian stood to speak. His voice was old but clear. It carried the weight of his long years. He reminded them of the first precept. Humanity stands together, united against the dark. But the enemy was not some rival faction. It was not a pirate fleet. It was a silent, unknowable thing. It dwarfed our greatest works. How could they fight a shadow? How could they reason with a void? The debate raged for hours. Some argued for a show of force, to send our finest ships, to prove our strength. Others called for caution, to wait, to learn. They argued that any aggression would be suicide. The council was divided. Fear had fractured their unity. The protocols had no answer for this. They were echoes of a simpler time. You knew nothing of this. Not at first. Your world was different. You were born in the twilight of a shielded world. Earth was not the bustling hub it once was. It was a sanctuary, a fortress. After the expansion wars, humanity grew cautious. We turned inward. We built shields to protect our home. The sky you knew has always been a filtered, starless black. A dome of shimmering energy blocked the cosmos. It kept out harmful radiation. It kept out asteroid strikes. It kept us safe. But it also kept us isolated. The endless sea of stars was just a story, a myth from a time before the Great Quiet. Your sun was a gentle, diffused glow. Your nights were absolute. You grew up on tales of the star-born age, when humanity reached for the heavens, when ships named Endeavour and Voyager charted the unknown. Those days felt like fantasy. Your reality was the hum of the planetary shield, the soft, recycled air of the arcologies, the quiet rhythm of a world at peace, a world asleep. You are a child of the endless dusk, you and everyone your age. You have never seen the true face of the night sky. You have never felt the raw light of another star. Your universe was Earth, safe, stable, and completely, utterly blind. A fact that was about to change in the most terrible way imaginable. The hum started subtly, a low thrumming deep within the planet's core. At first, it was mistaken for seismic activity, a minor tremor in the crust. But it did not stop. It grew stronger, a resonant frequency that vibrated through the very bones of the world. It was a sound no one had heard for 1,000 years. The awakening of giants had begun. The planetary defense platforms, dormant for an age, stirred to life. These were not mere orbital cannons. They were continent-sized weapon systems, built during the paranoia of the expansion wars. They were humanity's final, desperate defense, our ultimate promise of mutually assured destruction. Ancient machinery ground into motion, power conduits, cold for centuries, flooded with energy. The planetary shield flickered. Its power was being diverted to the waking titans. For the first time in your life, gaps appeared in the starless black sky. Raw starlight, unfiltered and terrifying, stabbed through the darkness. It was more beautiful and more frightening than any story had described. People panicked. The constant hum was a reminder of a forgotten fear. The legends of the war masters were suddenly real. The shields were failing. The sky was breaking. No one understood. The Council's silence from Luna only fed the growing terror. Had they doomed us all? Were our own weapons turning against us? It felt like the planet itself was screaming. Then the object at the edge of the system broke its silence. It was not a greeting. It was not a frequency for communication. The signal was a declaration. It pulsed with raw power, a single repeating wave of focused energy. It was not aimed at our worlds. It was aimed outward, away from our sun. A beacon, a marker. Our experts analyzed the signal. They tried to find a pattern, a language. There was none they could recognize. But the signal had a purpose. It was a simple, brutal message, one that needed no translation. The signal screamed one thing into the void. Here, I am here. The meaning was terrifyingly clear. It was not talking to us. It was talking to something else, something that was following it. The silent object was not an invader. It was bait. And our system was the trap. The blood drained from the faces of the council members. The argument stopped. The debate was over. They had wasted so much time. The Void Scout mission was authorized. It was a desperate, almost suicidal plan. Someone had to get close to the object. Someone had to board the silent alien vessel to find out what it was, to understand the signal, to prepare for whatever was coming. You were chosen, not for your experience. You had none. Not for your bravery. You were as scared as anyone. You were chosen because you were a child of the endless dusk. Your generation had a unique biological trait. Your eyes were more adapted to low-light conditions. A life under a filtered sun had prepared you for darkness. The irony was almost funny. The very thing that made you feel trapped was now your greatest asset. You and a handful of others were humanity's best hope. Your ship, the Stardust Drifter, was small and fast. It was designed to run silent, to ghost through the void without a trace. As you approached the massive alien structure, its scale became truly apparent. It was a mountain of metal and silence, a dead thing hanging in the void. There were no lights, no open hangars, no sign of life. Your pilot found a breach, a small rupture in the hull, likely from a micrometeoroid centuries ago. It was just large enough for your team to enter. You suited up. Your heart hammered against your ribs. You looked back at the Stardust Drifter. It was your only way home. Then you turned to the breach, and you stepped into the unknown. What you found inside was not a crew. The ship was hollow, a ghost vessel. Vast, empty corridors stretched into darkness. The air was thin, cold, and still. There were no signs of battle, no damage, just emptiness. The ship felt ancient, abandoned, like a tomb adrift between the stars. You and your team moved slowly. Your suit lights cut sharp beams through the oppressive dark. You were looking for a bridge, a control center, anything that could give you answers. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the breathing in your helmet. It was a lonely, fragile sound in the face of such immense emptiness. This was not an invasion fleet. It was something else entirely, something much, much older and much more tragic. You could feel it in the cold metal of the walls, a deep, abiding sadness, a sense of cosmic exhaustion. The ship wasn't hostile. It was tired, tired of running. You found the central chamber. It was not a bridge in the human sense. It was a sphere of crystal and light. In the center, a single console glowed with a faint blue light. It was the only sign of power on the entire vessel. Your tech expert managed to interface with it. The alien system was strange, but its core logic was based on mathematics, the universal language. You began to decrypt the alien ship's final records. They were not written in words. They were a torrent of sensory data, images, sounds, feelings, a direct stream of consciousness from the ship's last pilot. You saw what they saw. You felt what they felt. The log of the forlorn began to play in your mind. You saw galaxies you had only dreamed of, star-born civilizations of breathtaking beauty, worlds of light and music. The aliens were not warriors. They were explorers, artists, philosophers. Their culture was ancient and profound. They had charted the spiral arms of their galaxy. They had watched suns be born and die. They were a people of immense knowledge and peace. Then you saw the shadow. The same shadow from the forgotten probe's last message. It started at the edge of their galaxy, a formless, spreading darkness. It was not a fleet of ships. It was a living void, a swarm of entities that consumed energy, that consumed light, that consumed life itself. You felt their terror, the dawning horror as whole star systems winked out of existence, one by one. The logs showed their desperate flight, a mad exodus from a dying galaxy. They ran for millennia. They crossed the vast, empty spaces between galaxies, hoping to outrun the darkness, hoping to find a safe harbor. But the shadow was relentless. It was patient. it always followed. The aliens were not an invasion fleet. They were the last survivors of a galaxy consumed. Their ship was not a warship. It was an ark, a final, desperate attempt to preserve their memory, their story. They knew they could not outrun the enemy forever. So they had come to our system, a place they had identified as having intelligent life. They did not come to conquer. They came to warn. The signal they broadcast was not a beacon for their enemy. It was a final, desperate plea. A map. It contained all their knowledge, everything they had learned about the foe that hunted them. The Star Eaters. The declaration was not, "I am here." It was, "They are coming." You understood now. The chilling purpose of this ghost ship. The aliens had sent it here on its last reserves of power. They had aimed it at our system. They had broadcast their final warning. And then their civilization had finally died. The ship was a tombstone, a message in a bottle thrown across the cosmic ocean, a warning that we were next. The log ended. The blue light on the console faded to black. Silence returned to the central chamber. But it was a different kind of silence now. It was filled with the ghosts of 1,000,000,000,000 lost souls. The weight of a dead galaxy settled upon your shoulders. You were no longer just a soldier. You were a witness, a carrier of a terrible truth. Humanity must now stand with these strange refugees, or at least with their memory. Their ancient enemy is now at our door. The Star Eaters were coming. The log had given you their rough trajectory, their estimated arrival time. You did not have centuries. You did not have decades. You had years. Maybe, if you were lucky. You returned to the Stardust Drifter. The journey back to Earth was silent. No one spoke. There were no words for what you had seen. When you delivered your report to the Council of Echoes, the great hall of unity was still. The bickering factions, the proud generals, the wise philosophers, they were all silenced by the sheer scale of the threat. There was no more debate. There was only one path forward. An alliance of desperation was formed, not with a living race, but with the echoes of a dead one. The data from the alien ark was our only advantage. Their knowledge of the Star Eaters was our only hope. The refugee ship had given us a fighting chance, a chance to not suffer the same fate. The forge of hope was ignited. It was a project of unimaginable ambition. Human and alien minds, or rather, human minds and the alien data, united in a desperate plan. The greatest thinkers of your generation worked side by side with the recorded knowledge of the forlorn. They had to invent new sciences, new technologies, all in a race against time. The plan was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. They would turn a world into a weapon, not just a planet killer, something far greater, a weapon that could fight a living void. They chose a barren ice giant at the edge of our system, a world called Terminus. It would become our shield, or our tomb. Years passed in a flurry of activity. The endless dusk on Earth was now broken by a constant stream of ships, ferrying materials, personnel, and hope to the outer system. The hum of the old defense platforms was now joined by the roar of new forges. Humanity, for the first time in 1,000 years, was united, driven by a single terrifying purpose: survival. You were part of it. You were no longer just a scout. You were a leader. Your experience on the ghost ship had changed you. You understood the stakes better than anyone. You worked at the Forge of Hope. You helped integrate the alien technology. You saw the weapon take shape, a monument to fear and defiance. Then, the day came. The long-range sensors screamed, a distortion in space-time, far beyond the orbit of Terminus. They were here. The great enemy arrives. A fleet of darkness. It was just as the alien log had shown. A swarm of non-reflective ships. A moving patch of absolute black against the stars. They did not slow down. They did not communicate. They simply came. The new alliance met them at the edge of everything. Our fleet, newly forged and untested, stood ready. It was a pitifully small force against the encroaching night. But it was not our only defense. The true battle would be fought at Terminus. The Battle of the Terminus had begun. Our ships engaged the enemy, a desperate holding action, buying time. The Star Eaters were efficient, cold. They moved with a terrifying unity of purpose. Our ships fought bravely. They inflicted damage. But for every one of their dark vessels we destroyed, 2 more would take its place. It was a battle of attrition we could not win. The fleet was being decimated. But they held the line. They gave their lives for minutes, for seconds. On Terminus, the final preparations were made. The weapon was ready. It was a marvel of human and alien engineering. A network of energy converters that burrowed deep into the planet's core. It would turn the entire mass of the ice giant into a single, focused blast of energy. A new star, born in an instant, a light bright enough to burn away the darkness. But the price of dawn was high. The ultimate weapon required an ultimate sacrifice. The weapon needed to be guided, calibrated in the final moments. Its energy field was too powerful for remote operation. Someone had to stay behind on Terminus, to be at the heart of the storm, to ensure the weapon fired true. There was no shortage of volunteers. Every soldier, every engineer, every soul at the Forge of Hope was willing. But the choice was clear. It had to be someone who understood the enemy. Someone who had seen the ghosts of the forlorn. Someone who carried the weight of their warning. It had to be you. You said your goodbyes. You watched the last transport ship leave Terminus. You were alone on a world that was about to die. You stood in the control center, the heart of the weapon. Through the reinforced viewport, you could see the battle raging. You saw the flashes of light as human ships perished. You saw the inexorable advance of the dark fleet. You thought of the filtered sky of your youth, the quiet, safe world you had left behind. You had resented the endless dusk, but now you understood. It was a peace bought by ignorance, a peace that could never last. True peace had to be fought for. It had to be earned. The Star Eater fleet surged past the remnants of our defense. They ignored our worlds. They ignored our sun. They were drawn to the energy signature of Terminus. They saw it as a feast, a massive banquet of power waiting to be consumed. They did not see the trap. They were arrogant, confident, just as they had been in the last galaxy they devoured. You placed your hand on the activation console. It felt warm, alive. You took a deep breath. You thought of the forlorn, the artists, the explorers, the philosophers. You would not let their sacrifice be in vain. Their warning would be honored. Their memory would be our strength. A new dawn breaks over a scarred system. As the dark fleet swarmed Terminus, you activated the weapon. You did not see the light. You became the light. Terminus detonated. A star was born in the outer darkness. A supernova of impossible brightness. It tore a hole in the darkness. It scoured the Star Eater fleet from existence. The blast wave was immense, a cleansing fire that washed over the entire system. On Earth, the planetary shields glowed white-hot. They held, just barely. The sky, once a filtered black, was now bathed in a brilliant, searing light. The light of a new star, the light you had unleashed. When the light faded, the sky was different. The endless dusk was gone. Forever. The shields, damaged by the blast, were now a lattice of broken energy. And through the gaps, you could see them. The real stars. 1,000,000,000 points of light in the unfiltered, glorious night. It was a sight no human had seen from Earth in 1,000 years. You are no longer children of the endless dusk. You are something more. Something new. You are the guardians of a fragile, new beginning. Humanity had faced the great filter, the ultimate test, and it had survived. It scarred, battered, but alive. And for the first time in centuries, looking up at the stars with open eyes. The system was quiet. The dark fleet was gone. The ghost ship of the forlorn still drifted in the void. But it was no longer a tombstone. It was a monument, a symbol of an alliance that had saved 2 galaxies, one in spirit and one in fact. The price was high, a world, a fleet, a generation that had given its future for the survival of all. But the future was now possible. Humanity was united, forged in fire, looking outward once more. The age of isolation was over. The great quiet was broken. The sky was open. And you, the spirit of the one who pushed the button, are now part of the light. A silent guardian watching over a species that had finally earned its place among the stars. You are the guardians of the new light. And your watch has just begun. The universe is vast and full of wonders and terrors. But humanity is no longer hiding. We are ready. We will meet the dawn. We will honor the dusk. And we will never, ever forget the price that was paid. The story of the Star Eaters would become a legend, a cautionary tale whispered to children who now grew up under a sky full of real stars. A reminder that the universe is not always friendly, but that even in the deepest darkness, a single light can make all the difference. And that light is hope.